Mr. Bryza, hello.
Hello, nice to be with you.
Oh, thank you so much that you found time in your tight schedule and joining us today. We've prepared some question I would like to ask you about that.
Okay.
Could you please tell us about your activity now?
Sure. Well, since I left Baku, I left the Foreign Service when I left Baku. I got on an airplane in Baku, flew here, dropped off my wife and daughter, flew to Washington, and resigned from the Foreign Service face to face to then Secretary of State Clinton. And my plan was to come back to Istanbul and build a career in business while remaining involved in think tanks and foreign policy sort of analysis and advice. And so that's what I've done. I'm a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council in Washington, D.C. We have a program here in Turkey as well. I'm on the board of the Jamestown Foundation, another think tank in Washington, D.C. I ran a think tank in Estonia for 3 years in Tallinn, International Center for Defense Studies. But otherwise, I'm really developing my own businesses. So one is a strategic consulting company. So I help people who are planning major infrastructure investments figure out what the political situation is, what the economic situation is, advise them. I'm on the board of a couple of energy companies as well, one here in Turkey, one in the United Kingdom. And then finally, I have a joint venture with a Finnish company that provides solutions to environmental problems like oil spills on land or in the sea, or the need to clean up water in factories or in towns, and then treating of waste. Oily waste, but also all kinds of waste, and try to use as few chemicals as possible, make it as environmentally friendly as we can.
Next questions are about Azerbaijan. What was the thing in Azerbaijan that impressed you the most? What was in particular left in your memories, whether positive or negative?
That's a great question. There's so many, obviously, wonderful things. Probably the thing that sticks with me the most, that impressed me the most, and sticks with me to this day is how Azerbaijan is such a tolerant place, as such a mix of religions and cultures, and religious communities. Everybody talks about the Jewish community, and I was talking to the leader of the more Orthodox community. And he said, in Azerbaijan, there is not enough anti-Semitism because everybody treats us so well. And the people in my community often don't feel like we are a community. We're just Azerbaijanis. That's a beautiful thing. And when you think about it from a strategic perspective, it makes Azerbaijan even more special. It's as we all know, but this is what I think about it, a Shiite majority country, not even just a Muslim majority country, but Shiite majority. Bordering Iran and Russia, of course, with a secular society and one that's based on tolerating and not even tolerating, embracing so many different religious faiths. That's something I actually think about every day.
Mm-hmm. Would you please tell, during your stay in Azerbaijan, were you able to implement all the projects, or is there anything you weren't able to realize?
Oh, definitely. So, I ended up staying only for 1 year because a couple of senators wouldn't allow the full Senate to vote on my confirmation under the influence of one of the Armenian American diaspora groups. It was very mean-spirited, actually. So I started some projects, and they continued after I left, but I would have liked to have gone much further. So the one project my heart was really in, and we were working on this with First Lady Mehriban Aliyeva and with the Haidar Aliyev Foundation. It was to provide a counterweight to anyone who was trying to radicalize women and girls, Shiites along the Iranian border, not necessarily the Talish community, but everyone in the south of Iran, because the Iranians were trying to do that at that time. So how do you protect against that? Will provide vocational education opportunities for girls and then young women, and English training so that they could convince their fathers that they have skills that will allow them to earn money, and that they don't need to just remain in the house where their lives will be very limited and where their families then could be, if they're so conservative, they may be susceptible then to radical ideas. And we called it the Tagiev Initiative, after you know whom, because he started so much in Azerbaijan and the South Caucasus, and girls school. And so we got the process going. It wasn't going to be very expensive. But we had money from our, believe it or not, the U.S. Department of Defense had money to build schools. But we also wanted to use as much of the infrastructure that already existed, namely the Haidar Aliyev centers in Astara and in Lankaran and in a few other places. So that we began. But it was difficult to really launch it fully when I was only there for 1 year. But when Ambassador Morningstar came, they tried to keep it going for a while. But as happens with many projects, they just, if the initiator isn't there anymore, they go away. The other project or issue I was very, very interested in was developing agribusiness in Azerbaijan. I found that before I came, the U.S. government and then our allied and friendly governments, like the Norwegian government, French government, they focused very much, or I should say we had focused very much on helping individual farmers, small-scale farmers, improve their output, improve their efficiency. So, if a farmer had, let's say 10 dairy cows, and those cows were producing 7 liters of milk, whatever it was a day, well, we get it up to 10 liters. Like, okay, good, that's good. But what I felt was strategically to keep Azerbaijan as stable over the long run as possible and as prosperous as possible, with a diversified economy, not relying only on oil and gas. Well, it made sense to go back to Azerbaijan's own traditions. Azerbaijan is fundamentally an agrarian society, right? And agriculture has historically been the cornerstone of Azerbaijan's economy. So I was working with then economics minister, who was it? Well, it was the economics ministry, and a little bit with the agriculture ministry. But at that time, the agriculture ministry was not so reform-minded. So with the Minister Shaheen Mustafayev, we were thinking through ways to convince farmers to cooperate with each other and therefore be able to make use of advanced agricultural technologies, whether it's tractors and other machinery or advanced irrigation, automatic irrigation, or even satellite technologies that are able to look down at fields and figure out where you need to apply water or fertilizer in a scientific way. That project didn't move forward before I left. We were starting to, but I found that one of the big obstacles was that Azerbaijani farmers were not comfortable with the idea of cooperatives because it reminded them too much maybe of collectivized agriculture. And that was a bad thing for many people throughout the former Soviet Union, collective agriculture.
And how would you personally evaluate the current economic condition of our country? Just your personal opinion.
Well, I mean, compared to when I first started coming to Azerbaijan in 1998, it's miraculous. It's unbelievable. I mean, you've got the poverty level has plummeted since 2006 when the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan oil pipeline began operating. There have been improvements in social services, improvements in healthcare. When I travel around, or when I would before COVID travel around Azerbaijan's regions, I was always increasingly impressed by the amount of economic activity I could see as reflected in new shops and buildings being repaired or new buildings and roofs. But it's still not nearly enough. I mean, the economy still needs a huge amount of work to diversify, to develop sectors outside of oil and gas. As I said, agribusiness should be one. I know transportation has been something the government has really tried to develop. Heavy industry and building the equipment and the platforms for the oil and gas sector. That's great. Even aerospace and telecommunications. And I've been involved with a project that would try to create an integrated, or we are creating an integrated network of fiber optic cables stretching from Southeast Europe all the way through Georgia, Azerbaijan, under the Caspian Sea and into Central Asia. And that will have some data hubs, probably in Baku and in Tbilisi, where companies that provide content like Amazon or Netflix, American ones, but European ones as well, can place their content so that the actual computer servers are much closer to the consumers in these regions, and therefore the service is much faster, much higher quality. Azerbaijan could really become a regional hub for telecommunications in that way.
Mm-hmm. Will you be having any project related to our country in the future?
Well, I hope so. As I said, I already am working on one, right? This telecommunications hub and fiber optics network. And I would very much like to help out and develop business in what I talked about in the beginning: oil spill response, processing, managing oily wastes, treating water in industrial facilities, making sure the pollutants are taken out, and that when water is operating in let's say a steel mill or a power plant where a lot of heat is generated, that the heat doesn't create a chemical reaction that then damages the pipes and the machinery. So there are huge opportunities for me to do that with my business in Azerbaijan, and I'm really eager to do it as soon as the COVID era passes and I'm able to spend a lot more time there.
That's great. Mr. Bryza, thank you so much. Have a nice day too.
Thank you.